Hey, welcome back to the Andrew Roman Show. I'm so glad that you tuned in. If this is your first time listening, definitely welcome to the club. I think you came out of the best episode to come in, because if you're already an OG of this podcast, you know it's been a little bit since we've had a guest, but there's no better way to start the guest list, if you will, with my new friend, Nick Ruffin. Thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate it.
Definitely glad to be here, man. Looking forward to it. Appreciate the honor, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll introduce you a little bit, and then we'll kind of get into the heart of this. But again, if this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on podcast, like the video. I always do this, Nick. You're new here, but I have this tradition of introducing new coffee mugs every time. I have this weird collection that I know my children at some point later in life will hate me for it, because they'll all have to move it when I die. Right. But for now, it's fun. But anyways, there's a friend from church brought it from Valencia, Spain. So this one's here, and I've been trying to. I didn't do it this time, but I've been trying to drink either coffee or tea, and it just has not been working out. I've been totally failing in that, but. All that to say, let's get to the very heart of this. So Nick and I met over social media, actually, over Instagram. I think we met over, I think you saw me on the story where I was promoting a book, and then you're like, hey, I have a podcast too. So I'll let you kind of do your introduction. I mean, tell us a little bit who you are, introduce yourself kind of to the listeners and what you do, and then we'll get right to it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So name's Nick. I am the host, creator, editor, producer, you name it. I do something. I do a little bit of all of it with Vantage Point Podcast, which actually started in 2019. Wow. And I'm embarking on year 2 of this journey. And I've been married for 10 years. Between us, we have 6 children, 15, 17, 18, and 19. So that's definitely awesome. Busy in this weird, interesting season of life, where, the parenting roles are changing and it's more of an advisory role at this point. But, I'm a partner at Transformation Church. I've been there. My family, we've been there for 8 years now. Wow. Originally from Chicago. Really? We moved to Tulsa in 2012. So we're embarked. This is year 9. In Tulsa. And so big sports fan. If you follow me on Instagram, I am Nick Ruffin. I am sports, quotes, everything. Well, anything.
Your son plays sports. Does he play basketball?
So all 3 of my sons play football. And my son here in Tulsa, he actually plays for Bixby. And they just won their 3rd state championship. All
right, small flex. Hey, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do that.
I said, you got 3 more chips than I do. So, because we were trash in high school. But I'm just glad to be a part of the podcast, man. And for your listeners out there, I know you guys have been rolling with Andrew, and the show is amazing. The content's amazing. It's like a laid back ride, and it's totally awesome. So I'm just glad to be in the passenger seat.
Hey, no. Thank you for coming. I know it's for everyone that's listening. We've messaged. I think it's maybe back in even July. It had to be when I did an episode on dating, and I mentioned Mike Todd's relationship goals, which definitely go get that. And I think he shared it on his story, and that's the way that we got connected. I think
that was it, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And then it's always been, one of those back and forth. We all have that one friend that we always say, let's get together, and then never happens. They're like, hey, totally on your schedule. Shoot me a text, and it just never happens. And this was Nick and I for a long time until this new year. We just said, hey, we have to do something together. And one of the main reasons is you have a podcast yourself. It's called Vantage Point. Guys, you have to check it out. It will give you, pun intended, a better vantage point on life. And I love the way he sets up his podcast into different seasons. He had the seasons, he had America Divided when we were going through a lot of racial tensions, especially that were very highlighted last summer. And then going into, I think it was father figures. My order might not be perfect, but this last one is called Perspectives. And I think we'll dive a little bit to that in just a minute. But tell us a little bit, how has your journey been in the podcast? Because you started the podcast before it got kind of, it was the thing to do in quarantine. You know, that's all the podcasts, everyone was bored at home and started a podcast, but you started before that. you were the trailblazer. So what got you into it? Like, how did you feel? Hey, I want to, because it's like being self-employed. I mean, you're everything. Yeah. You edit, you do everything. What got you into it? I don't know. Tell us a little bit about that.
So it really started for me, 2017. And, so 2 years before I even got to Vantage Point Podcast, you know, I was in prayer. I was I think it was one of those at the beginning of a year, you know, we're doing the fast and trying to figure out, okay, God, what do you have for me this year? What, you know, where do you want me to go? And he literally said, I want you to use your voice and your gift. And so I said, great, I'll start a blog. Because I took ABC and did DEF, and that didn't work out. So then my own insecurities, procrastinations, all that set in. And so I get to 2018, which was just one of the wildest, just tested years of my life, for my marriage, everything. And I really discovered myself that year, came to grips with a lot of things I was dealing with. And fast forward to the beginning of 2019, and God, in a very subtle voice, same time of year, same fast forward 2 years later, he says, I want you to use your voice and I want you to use your words just like I told you to 2 years ago.
Right.
And I said, okay, I think he's serious this time. And so I went through this whole planning phase where I was like, okay, I need this. Oh my God, this is so much money. Oh my God, and I just had this like Moses moment for about 4.5 months where it was just like, but I can't do this. I can't do that. I don't have this. And literally I got to April and just started writing the first series. And I got to May of 2019 and the podcast was born. I had like this, like the music you hear now on Vantage Point is not the music I started with. It was very, very just like elevator music. It was, I mean, it worked, but it was, you know, not what you hear now. But it was literally, the first series I did was called Leap.
Okay.
And it was about Moses. It was about my own journey, stepping out here, doing this thing. I'm worried, you know, didn't like anything how I sounded. And I just said, okay, I'm going to write these things and here we go. And I haven't looked back since.
Wow.
But it was interesting. I got started in May 2019 and I got to November of 2019 and I just ran out of gas and I procrastinated and I just stopped. Like I think I did an episode in November, I did an episode in December that year, and I just hit this just wall.
Wow.
And then again, go to January 2020 before COVID, like I say pre-COVID, but it was still around, but we weren't, you know, we weren't there where we were. And so I said, all right, God, I'm going to just January, we're going to jump out, we're going to do this. And for the first time, he says, wait, don't do it until I tell you to. I was like, for 2 years, you told me to go do it. And now you tell me to wait.
Huh.
And the first 5 months of 2020, it was just me and him. It was just me and him. And literally everything you heard for Vantage Point from May 2020 to December was all birthed in those 5 months.
Wow.
And I got to April and he said, relaunch on your birthday. And on May 1st, 2020, I relaunched it and I've done an episode every week since May 1st. And it is taxing. It is a journey to weekly record. And people were, oh, you should just do monthly. You should just do every other week. And I said, no, I know what God told me.
Yeah.
I'm going to do. And so there's been some late nights, some long nights, some editing fiascos and trying to do interviews via Zoom and internet connection and all these. I mean, it was a journey. But it's been one that I've been just so thankful to be on. Wow. Because I've really just not just rediscovered myself, but I've rediscovered God in a whole different way.
Yeah.
And to be able to say that my voice has been heard in 20 countries.
What in the
just
world?
Ridiculous to me.
That, oh my gosh.
Just, I mean, I have like literally faithful listeners in places I've never been.
Who would have guessed that, right?
I just was like, he just wants me to talk about stuff, so that's what I'm gonna do. And if one person hears it, great. If 10,000 hear it, great. Okay, But it's been a journey meeting amazing people like yourself and so many other podcasters out here, and just watching God just do what He does. And like you said, the boom of the podcast of 2020. Just, I mean, everybody's doing them.
Yeah.
But it's been a journey, man, for sure.
Well, man, thank you for giving that synopsis, because honestly, I was curious myself, because I hadn't really heard kind of your podcast story. I knew that you had started it before kind of this whole COVID thing. And I think you brought up some good points that I think are good transitions to one of your last series, or it might be the series you're currently on as well. But you mentioned this, like God spoke to you and you had this Moses moment where you said, God, I know you spoke to me, but I'm not qualified. You don't feel qualified and all this. And then you went back the next year, hear from God, and God's like, hey, well, I'm just going to repeat what I told you before. And maybe you're a listener right now and you feel, and I've heard pastors say, I've heard Mike Todd say it, kind of like, we all want a new word, but we haven't obeyed the one He's already given us. Yeah. And I felt I was in the same seat as yourself. I mean, maybe this podcast that I have is also maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years of procrastination. And just saying, God, I know you want me, but I'll do it one day. And then I did it. I did one episode in 2019 and never did another one. Because I just, I got busy and I got procrastinating, but it was kind of the same thing. So I think God's doing something. And I listened to your last podcast of 2020 and you were talking about perspective. And maybe for everyone listening right now, we're in 2021 and this is a new year. But it's funny because it's only a new year in some sense, in the sense that the calendar restarts, but life hasn't restarted. Your daily job hasn't restarted. And we kind of sometimes have this unrealistic idea that 2021 will somehow be a miracle year. And everything's going to be easy and everything is just, it was just 2020 that was weird, but we're just, as we saw, this year has already started with a lot of weird stuff. And you said one thing that was really cool about perspective. You said, people talked about 2020 being great vision. And you said one thing that encouraged me, which said maybe 2020 is perfect vision. It was God's vision, because God, COVID, whether it be the race thing here, especially in the U.S., or economic thing, the presidency, whatever you want to call it, wherever you're listening, that's at least specific to the U.S. But it didn't throw God on the loop. It didn't catch Him off guard. It didn't do that. And you said maybe 2020 coming at the end of it is maybe a year we gained the most perspective. Yeah. About life. And I don't know if you can elaborate how just finishing 2020. How does that give us perspective for this new year? What did 2020 teach us per se, or how does that shift our perspective a little bit?
I think for a lot of people, it was like 2020 was this. I mean, like you even said it, like we got to the beginning of 2020 in January, and if we all go back, I mean, you could probably pull 100 churches from January 2020, and I guarantee their word of the year, their first sermon series of the new year, that New Year's Eve service was 2020 is going to be vision. It's going to be clarity. It's going to be all of these things. We're going to see God do these things. We're going to, and then everything happened. Right. The racial injustice, the political everything, the code, everything happened. Yeah. And there were people like, oh my gosh, like this year didn't show me anything. And I'm like, no, it showed us. I think I see people more clearer in the midst of pandemic, in the midst of racial injustice, in the midst of should I wear a mask or not? Right. And you begin to see, and you know, I remember when I played basketball and even coached it, like you find out the most about a team when they're either losing or they've just lost a big game, or they're having this rough go in the game and they're in this pressure situation, right? You will find out the most about people in the most pressure situations, right? Wow. Not the best years of the world, but years like this, like 2020. And then, you know, there were so many people that got to the end of the year and they were like, man, I can't wait for this year to be over. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If we rush through this, and I get it, I said it myself several times, but then I had this perspective that, but if I rush through this pain, this anguish, this confusion, what will I learn? Yeah. What will I take away from it? Because if I just push 2020 out the window, I might push my lessons out the window.
Wow. I
might push my blessings out the window. Yeah. I might push the thing that God had for me in 2020. I feel like that was a year that people got closer to God, or they got further away from Him because they blamed Him for everything.
Sure, yeah, right.
You know, it was just the polar year. It was, you either were here or you were there. You were either a Republican, you were a Democrat. You were Black Lives Matter, or you were All Lives Matter. Right. You were wear my mask, don't wear my mask. Like you weren't in between. There was no in between in 2020. And so then we get to 2021, and I think even in perspectives, I think I said it like, man, what if 2021 is worse than 2020? And
that's not a popular question, though. No one wants to ask themselves that.
No, nobody wants that one. But in the first 31 days of this year, it's already, we've seen some stuff we didn't think we would ever see.
Right.
You know, when you think about the Capitol and there's everything going on. And so what I really feel like God has told us as people is we need to tune into Him more than ever. Because that's where our anchor is. That's where our sustaining force will be. Because like you said it, like a lot of things in 2020 threw us off, but it didn't throw God off. He wasn't sitting in heaven and got up off the throne like, oh my gosh, what, COVID?
Yeah.
Like, no, he didn't do that, you know. And it was even more interesting watching kind of the Christian community during COVID, because even that became a polarizing. Right. Do you open your church? Do you not open your church? Yeah. What do you do? You know. And so it just opened eyes, I think. And if you walked out of that year without a different perspective about anything that you may have thought previously before 2020, like you totally missed it. Like you just, it passed you by, and you know, you might still be mad about it. You might still have some 2020 residue on you in 2021. Yeah. But, you know, it was a year that was unprecedented, none of which I've ever lived in, and I'm 37. So, you know, unless you're 95 or something 95, like that.
You've been through some stuff at 95.
You were there in 1918 when that pandemic happened. You might have, you know, oh yeah, I've been through that before. But most of us have not been through anything like this. So.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point in the lessons learned. And, you know, we did a couple episodes like this in this podcast. But I think, like you mentioned, there's a temptation to just go into 2021 in kind of just in a passive or defensive mode, kind of saying, you know, I don't want to expect anything, you know, out of 2021. And if I'm going to expect anything, I'm just going to hopefully wishful thinking everything's going to go back to normal. Or on the defensive, meaning like you mentioned, everyone wants to feel like they're back in quarantine and they had this excuse to just watch movies all night, you know, and just not face the world, not face the reality. That what, you know, our individual worlds, if you will, or our collective, like in the US or whatever country you're listening to right now. But I think one thing that we were talking a little bit before we started recording this podcast is this thing where you mentioned last year was so polarized in every topic. There was no black and white. And there was no middle ground per se. And I think for a lot of that, for some of it was unnecessary, right? And then for some of it, I think, sure, obviously, when it comes to things of faith and things like that, obviously, but it did challenge us to say, hey, I mean, we pastor a church ourselves, and we saw many people not come back after COVID. After lockdowns, church is open and they're like, nah, I think I like my Sundays off.
Yeah.
But for me, what kind of goes into this year, and maybe you can speak on it as I've got a couple, maybe 5-7 more minutes, but to really speak on the way that God still has a purpose for 2021. Like God still has a purpose for each one of us. And God wants us to be in the proactive mode this year of, like you mentioned, holding on to him, because last year, if you try to hold on to anything, it shattered and it fell apart. Yeah. And I think it taught me saying, holy cow, what am I holding on to? If it's not Jesus, it's just going to fall apart. And I do feel that maybe, I don't know if you can speak to those people right now that are just kind of feeling, I feel like that's the feeling, right? Just kind of, just going to live life and what happens, right? But I personally don't think that's how God wants us to live. I feel like God wants us to have a drive. I don't know if you can kind of speak a little bit into that new perspective for this year.
Yeah. And, when you were talking, I was thinking about something that Nick Saban said one year. He had won, not this year when they won, but another year that he won a championship. And they asked him, like, what are you going to do? Man, you just won, right? Yeah. He's like, well, we're going to celebrate for 24 hours and then we're going to get back to work. That's what he said. We're going to celebrate. We're going to get back to work. And so in thinking that, I wonder, I would imagine that he has the same mindset if they lost the championship. We're going to reflect on this for 24 hours and then we're going to get back to work.
Wow.
And so when I think of 2020 and if, somebody that's listening that says, man, 2020 was just trash. I just don't want to go back to church. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to even hope and dream again. I don't want to have faith in God. It's like, 2020 might have been a loss for you. Might have been the best year for some people. Sure. You never know. I've talked to people who said 2020 was like the best year they ever had. Yeah.
Especially if you sold toilet paper. Yeah. That was the best year you've ever had.
Yeah. You sold toilet paper. You were an essential worker that, maybe you got overtime. I mean, whatever it is, it's perspective, right?
Right.
And I think that's the beauty about perspective. It's yours.
Yeah.
And it's so wild how people judge perspective, but it's my perspective. Like,
yeah, exactly.
About what I experience. It's not me giving you fact. It's just out of my experience. Here's what I gained, lost, obtained. But when I think about that year, it's like, hey guys, we're here in 2021. It's a new year. The calendar date may have changed. We're still going to have some trouble. We're still, COVID wasn't going to just go away at midnight when the ball dropped. It wasn't going to happen. The political division didn't go away at midnight. The racial tension didn't go away at midnight. No. But did your perspective follow you after midnight?
Oh, that's good.
Because I feel like I was talking to somebody the other day and they had made this decision to step out on faith. And the way that they did it was they wrote it out. And I said, wow, you made a declaration about what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement is if you're still feeling 2020 and 2021, you probably need to make a declaration. You probably need to write something out. I mean, lament, write out what you feel, talk about it, find somebody to talk to about it. Because I think a lot of people are still holding on to 2020 and don't know how to let it go. They don't know how.
Wow.
But if you make the declaration to release that fear, that anxiety, that do I, I want to just dip my toe into 2021, or I heard it said this way, my 30-day trial of 2021 is over and I'm good. I'll just wait till 2022. Well, time doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Whether you like it or not, life is going to happen. The world is going to move on. Yeah. We prefer to move on with you because God has a plan and a purpose for you. Yeah. And it's not to be in limbo, you're kind of in this purgatory of what do I do? Where do I, no, it's let's make the declaration that 2020 was what it was for you.
Yeah.
And let's turn that page and then let's move forward and not just move forward because, we just got to go forward. No, but move forward with expectation because God's still on the throne. He's still going to do amazing things. Yeah. His plan and purpose for you is still there. Dream again. Think bigger than what you see because 2020 was literally just a moment. It's a moment in time.
Yeah.
5 years from now, it'll still be a moment. But there's a bigger movement that's going on.
I love that.
We cannot get stuck in this moment of 2020. And even back to the example, if Nick Saban lost a championship, what if he said, I'm not coaching anymore? I'm done because we lost. You can't be done with living because you had a bad year or a bad day or a bad week. Yeah. We have to dust that off. We have to talk about it and we reflect and we move forward with an expectation that something better is coming, something bigger is coming. So that would be my encouragement for everybody.
I love that. That what you mentioned, that 2020 is a moment. Sure, for some it might have felt like the longest moment they've ever lived, but don't throw away God's movement that He's doing for that moment of 2020. And I love that. I'm basically just repeating what you said, and to all those listening right now, remember, in the church, at least we say this verse, Jeremiah 29:11, so many times, right? That God has a plan for you, not of evil and calamity, but for a hope in the future. Remember that God spoke to the Israelites while they're in exile, while things are bad, in their version of 2020, if you will. So God doesn't always speak those things, obviously, when you're already living them. He speaks, God is the God who speaks things out of nothing and makes things happen, right? So if He can make something out of nothing, He can definitely work with something. Whether that be trashed like 2020 was for many people or regardless of what it is. But Nick, as we got some kind of wrapping thoughts, I just want to thank you, obviously, for being here. Man. And how can people connect with you? You mentioned a few connections with your podcast. Is it also, I know some podcasts, on what platforms can they listen to it? What's a good way to connect?
Yeah. So, again, thank you for having me, man. This has been awesome. I mentioned earlier Instagram. You can follow me. I am Nick Ruffin. You can also follow Vantage Point. It has a Instagram page as well, just at This Is Vantage Point. We're on all major platforms, so you can do Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, some of the smaller other ones like Google Podcasts, and then some other ones as well. So anything, or you can just go to the website, www.vantagepointpodcast.us, and you can listen there, and you can also go to hit subscribe on there, and it'll show you all the other platforms. I think it's up to maybe 10 or 11 right now, but Instagram is going to be the big one. That's where I'm at. Would love any comments, subscribe, follows, reviews, anything. Just come on for the ride.
Hey, awesome. Hey, Nick, thanks so much for being here. And for everyone listening, thank you for listening. Remember, don't hold on to the moment of 2020 and disregard the movement that God is doing in 2021 in your life. So we'll see you in the next episode of The Andrew Ramaz Show. God bless you guys.